everyone, and welcome to Take Two Radio. I'm Pam, your host, and joining me tonight as my co-host is, I think his name is David. I just hooked up with him on the corner. Is that your name?
Yep, that's my look.
Yes, we are dorky tonight. That's us, but we're going to have fun.
And it's cold out.
Yeah, it's cold out. It's actually not that bad here in Chicago today. I mean, of course, the sun is going down and it always gets colder, but during the day, I don't know what the temperature was. But when the sun is out, it always makes things better, you know?
Yes, it does.
Well, I guess we should get started, and I'd love to welcome our guest tonight because I've been so looking forward to this. Joining us tonight is well-known author and numerologist Michael John Fierro, the man with three names. Hello, Michael.
Good evening.
Michael.
Hey. So where are you at? Are you on the East Coast?
Yeah, I'm at Jersey Shore.
Okay.
Oh.
So you're probably having similar weather like David is, because David's in New York.
Yeah, it was in probably mid-50s today. It's supposed to be up near 70 over the next couple of days. So.
Yes, it is.
Oh, lucky you. I think I need to take a vacation for a couple of days.
There you
Come on
go.
over.
Better do it quickly before it changes again.
Right? By the time I fly there, it's going to change. You know how that goes, especially here in Chicago. You know, you kind of look at what time it is to tell what the weather's like. It changes so quickly. And I know that people that live downtown near the lake, you know, they're usually colder than us here in the suburbs. Does it work that way over by you as well?
No, actually, being near the ocean keeps it a little bit warmer.
Oh, okay.
I mean, especially because I'm very close. I mean, I'm less than, as the crow flies, probably a mile from the ocean. And, you know, during the winter, there's many times where we will get rain where surrounding areas will get snow because of the temperature differential because of the ocean.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. And I guess you'll always stay there unless you're a snow type person.
Well, I'd like to get out of here.
Where would you like to go?
Anywhere but here sometimes.
Right. Yeah. I want to go where it's warm all year round. You know, people talk about loving the changing seasons and stuff like that. When you grow up in Chicago, at least for me, I'm tired of it at my age now. I want to go somewhere and just like chill and be in the sun.
Yeah, well, I lived in Fort Lauderdale for 13 years, and I would never go back there. So too much hot weather after a while gets to be a bit boring, actually.
Really? Well, I'll have to test that out myself.
And when I moved back up north after 13 years in Florida, I couldn't wait for the first night that I got to wear a sweater or a jacket. It was actually pretty exciting. So.
Oh, my gosh. Well, I have to test that out for myself someday and go live somewhere for a few years and see how I feel about it. But I know right now the way I feel is I can't stand winter, so anywhere but here. But let's back up a little bit and go into your history and tell us and the listeners how you became interested in numerology.
Well, back in 1984, I was still living in Florida, and I came to New Jersey. We had a surprise birthday party for my mom, and after dinner, the siblings all went over to my brother's apartment, and we're hanging out, and my youngest sister was there, and she started doing this numerology stuff, and I had no idea what it was. Perhaps I had never heard of it. I had no idea what it was about or how it was done, and you know, it's interesting today because after 30 years of working with it, I still encounter a very high percentage of people who have no idea what it is. But in any event, she did this numerology, and she did a reading for me, and it was unbelievably accurate. And because I was always good in math and I had a head for numbers, the fact that it was a numbers-based modality kind of piqued my curiosity. And that started me on my journey with it. I dabbled in it for the first few years, and then in the early 90s, began to pursue it more with more interest and more dedication, and been working with it really ever since that day, though.
Well, what type of training do you have for it? I mean, are there like classes or something that you can take in colleges, or is this something that you learn on your own from other people?
Well, as with most things that I've ever done in my life, I taught myself. It's a relatively easy modality to learn, and I say relatively easy. I mean, obviously there's intricacies and details that with time become a little more evident, but compared to learning, say, astrology, it's certainly much simpler, because all you really need to know is the alphabet, the numbers 1 through 9, and then understand the meanings of the numbers and how they play out. You know, with astrology, you need to learn all those different angles, the planets, and all of that other stuff. And you know, astrology can be a lot more difficult to learn. Where numerology, quite honestly, if you read my book cover to cover and paid attention, by the end of the book, you would be able to understand it and at least do a chart for yourself to get a better basic understanding.
And those are key words, paid attention. To read it, right?
Exactly. Right.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how numerology and astrology are similar to each other. So astrology sounds like it's a lot more steps and a lot more complicated to understand than numerology itself.
Well, to construct a chart, yes, definitely you need to certainly know what you're doing with astrology. Not that you don't need to know what you're doing with numerology, but again, it's a little bit simpler to work with. As far as similarities, it's amazing. If you get a good astrological reading and a good numerological reading, you'll pretty much receive the same information. I do a lot of radio, and I'm a frequent guest on some astrologist programs, and it's always we always both find it interesting when, in taking a caller, I will offer up my interpretation, my perspective based on numerology, and then he'll follow with saying, well, this is this particular aspect in your chart, and it definitely coincides with what I have said.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Now, as far as being an author, your first book that you wrote was called 9/11 for the Soul, 4/11 for the Mind, a collection of thoughts and meditations. Would you tell us more about the book and what it consists of exactly?
Well, that first book I did in the late 90s, and it was just a collection of, different things I'd come across in life, or certain different things that I had conceived of in my own mind. So it was really one of those books where, let's say you're stuck in a particular area in your life, you open it to a random page, see what it says to you, and so use it as somewhat of a guidance tool. And I did right after I finished that book is when I started writing my numerology book, which actually took me until 2009 to complete.
And that book is called You Know Your Name, Look Up Your Number, An Introduction to Numerology. Now, did you do any other research on it, or it was all based on your knowledge and experience?
Based on my knowledge and experience. Again, it's almost 30 years now I've been working with this. I've worked with thousands of clients, and through the years have certainly developed a vast storehouse of knowledge and information about the topic. And again, having used it regularly, was able, as time went on, to develop different connections between different numbers, and start to kind of knit things together, so to speak. So there's some of my work that may be a little different than what you may find out there otherwise, because there's for instance, there's a certain segment of the chart that's known as the challenges. When the challenges come out of your birth date, and they're the issues in life. These are the things that can really trip you up. These are things that in many instances can drive into therapy. But through my work and through my understanding of the numbers, I was able to discern that particular numbers certainly indicated conditions and situations in life that can certainly be very traumatic or dramatic. Things like abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, divorce, addictions, anger issues, all of that stuff. So I put a great deal of emphasis that in my work because of, again, the negative impact it can have in one's life. And also to get people to understand that if it's in your chart, that you need to understand that on some level you asked for it to be there. I firmly believe that you chose your name and your birth date and your family of origin because your soul understood and knew who you needed to be and what you needed to do in this lifetime. So within the context of your name and birth date are all of those things. So let's just say, for instance, that you're the child of an alcoholic. And if it shows up in your chart, that would be a 7 challenge, especially in the first position. Then obviously on some level you needed that experience. So rather than go through, and the goal of my work is personal empowerment through understanding, acceptance, and responsibility. Understand that it's there and it's there for a reason. Accept that fact and then take responsibility for yourself. So rather than going through life being a victim, pointing the finger at mommy or daddy or whomever else for your woes, take responsibility for the fact that on some level you asked to participate in that particular scenario because there was something there for you to learn.
That's really interesting. I never would even think of something like that. Because, and it's funny, too, that you bring up a child of an alcoholic, because I am one. My father's an alcoholic. And now you're saying that my soul actually chose to be who I am in my birth date and so forth in my family. And I'm wondering what I needed to learn from that experience.
Well, I
guess
have
not to be one, Well,
obviously, that would be one of them. And the caution would have been very strong for you to be careful to avoid that type of behavior. Now, I have a 7 challenge in the first position. I came out of a family. My father was a compulsive gambler. So that 7 challenge obviously indicated that, and the caution was there for me to be very aware of and very careful of not slipping into some type of addictive behavior throughout the course of my life. There's other conditions and whatnot that apply to a 7 challenge. But for me, obviously the most dramatic would be that addiction thing because of as you can well attest, the extremely negative impact it can have on your home life and on your behavior. And in that vein, one of the things I've been advocating for a great many years, and I write a monthly column for a couple of online magazines, and what I addressed this month was the use of numerology in the educational system as a better means to understand children and then use it as a guideline in how to handle them and guide them and also how to teach them. Because
I definitely need to read that. I have 4 of those little monsters, but 3 are pretty much grown.
Well, because I believe in this, and we'll just stay with the addiction milieu here. If you could identify little Johnny when he entered the school system, that there was a high probability that he comes out of a family where addictions are an issue. Now, anyone who knows that people who come out of alcoholic families tend to start acting up in their teens.
Right.
There's really not too much difficulty until they hit the teen years, and then it just blows up. Well, if you can identify little Johnny when he entered the school system, that this, in fact, is an issue.